My name is Chris Devlin. I'm a portfolio manager at Selective Wealth Management. We specialize in analyzing publicly traded companies, going through financial statements and looking at profitability. Been doing it for several years now, and was asked to cover the topic on fixed versus variable costs. And I think that this would be a really beneficial lesson for local business owners, especially to learn about how these different types of costs can impact your profitability in the business that you're operating. So with that, we'll go ahead and dive in. These two different types of costs can be categorized again as fixed costs, which are any expenses that you would incur that are not dependent on the level of business activity. Or to put that in plain English, these are bills that you have to pay no matter how much business that you do. Some examples of this would include rent. So let's say you're operating a cupcake shop here in town. Your rental expense you're going to have to pay no matter what. It doesn't matter how many customers are coming in or out of your business, you're going to incur those expenses. Other examples would include a mortgage if you owned your building, insurance that you have to pay in order to operate your business, and then also equipment expenses for a lot of different types of businesses. These would all be examples of fixed expenses, things that you're going to incur no matter how many customers that you serve. And the second category of expenses that we're going to cover today are variable costs. Variable costs are expenses that are dependent on business activity. Or again, to put this another way, imagine that you sell sandwiches. This would be the cost of each sandwich. So that's your bread, your ham, your lettuce, your tomato. Every time you sell an additional sandwich, it's going to increase your costs as a business owner. Some other examples of this would include hourly wages, commissions, and materials used in production. That's probably the most common form of variable cost for business owners. And materials could include anything, for example, burritos at Chipotle, coffee at Starbucks, or even jet fuel for American Airlines. These are all different types of variable expenses where they go up or down depending on how many customers they serve. Then there are some expenses that fall somewhere in between. For example, salaried wages would be harder to classify, or utilities. If you're running a restaurant, you may need your utilities just to keep the lights on, and the number of customers doesn't really impact what your bill is. But if you're running a factory, electricity could be a huge input into your production costs. So for every type of expense that you incur, you just need to think about, does this go up and down with the level of business activity as you're producing goods for your customers? So why do fixed costs and variable costs matter? Fixed costs are the ones I think that are most intimidating for business owners. If you don't cover your fixed costs, you're going to go out of business. So if you can't make your rent payments, you're going to have to close up shop. Whereas variable costs are a little bit less intimidating. Variable costs only grow as your business activity grows. So the more customers that you serve, the more expenses you're going to incur. But it can be a really good problem to have because it means business is booming. So to really illustrate these two types of expenses, I think it would be best to use a real-life example. And since most of us are local here in Lynchburg, we'll go ahead and talk about the Chipotle down on Wards Road. Now, we don't know the exact rental expense for Chipotle, but I would estimate it around $4,000 per month. So that would be a fixed expense for Chipotle. They have to pay that every month, no matter how many customers come and go through their doors. In order to do that, they need to sell burritos. So a chicken burrito at Chipotle costs $7.60. That would be the sales price. And then they also have a variable cost associated with that, which is how much it costs to make each burrito. That's for the rice, the beans, the chicken, the wrap. The variable cost for a burrito is roughly $1.76. If you take the sales price minus the variable costs, you arrive at the gross profit per burrito, which is roughly $5.83. So a very, very important question for all business owners is how many burritos would I have to sell in order to cover my fixed expenses? No matter what type of business you're running, this is something that you're going to have to look at. How many units or goods do I have to sell in order to break even on my fixed expenses? In the case of Chipotle, we can just take the $4,000 in rent and divide it in the gross profit per burrito. So $4,000 divided by $5.83 would be roughly 685 burritos. And the Chipotle down on Wards Road sells that many in roughly 2 days. So 685 units is required in order to cover your fixed expenses. And covering your fixed expenses is very, very important as a business owner because everything that you sell beyond that becomes profit for you. So a really important question for business owners then when they're looking at fixed versus variable costs is how do you go about maximizing your profit? It's a very important question, and there are basically two key things that you need to accomplish in order to maximize profitability. The first is to minimize your fixed costs without subtracting from your customer experience. If you can keep your rental expenses low, insurance payments low, and all of your fixed costs low, your break-even point will be lower, so you can do less business while still being profitable. And the second most important thing to maximizing profit is to actually maximize your gross profit. Don't worry about your variable costs, and I'll kind of explain this a little bit. So lowering prices can lead to lower profits per customer, but many more customers. So we'll take two examples. Imagine you were selling 1,000 burritos at a $5.83 profit. That is much more profitable than selling 600 burritos at an $8 profit. The first scenario would generate around $4,800 in gross profits, where the second scenario is $5,830. And then when considering the fixed costs, these numbers become even more significant. In the first scenario, where you're paying $4,000 in rent with $4,800 in gross profit, your net income is only $800. Whereas in the second scenario, income increases to $1,830. That's a 128% increase in income just by lowering prices and selling more. So here are the key takeaways about fixed costs versus variable costs. Fixed costs don't change based on business activity, whereas variable costs increase as you do more business. And again, the goal is to minimize fixed costs while aiming to maximize gross profits. Don't worry about increasing variable costs as you do more business. As long as your gross profits are maximized, it'll maximize profit for you as a business owner. And then again, don't be afraid to lower prices if it generates more business. I think this is an error that a lot of businesses first make when they're starting up, but as long as you're maximizing your gross profits, it'll lead to success.